Lose the shame. No going to college. No getting a career. No buying a house. No marrying. No starting a family. No doing anything more than the bare minimum. Put no effort into anything anymore. If we're not owed anything from the world/life, then we don't owe the world/life anything either. This is the general sentiment Gen Z and millennials are expressing all over the world from New York to Tokyo. I will say the put no effort into anything part is a bit too nihilistic even for me. I mean, absolutely put effort into your hobbies and passions and the things you actually enjoy. You know, whether that's video games, art, sports, snowboarding, whatever, right? But yeah, when it comes to how society constantly shames and humiliates us for being unemployed or not making as much money as they deem acceptable, Gen Z is sending a strong message that we don't care anymore because guess what? We never owed you a job in the first place. I understand that many young men have a negative bias against markets because of their inability to compete in them, but I promise you, it gets better. This was a snarky comment that happened in an argument from one of my community posts, coming from a guy who's clearly watched way too many top 1% alpha male videos and is just totally detached from reality. Just to clarify, I've only read that last sentence here because that's what's relevant to the topic of this video. But to be fair to him, I'm showing the entire comment here just so no one thinks I'm unfairly quoting him out of context or anything like that. Now, there are several huge problems with this comment. The first one being that it's not even an argument to begin with. It is just a personal attack with the intention of trying to get a reaction out of the other person when you yourself don't have an actual point. It's like how when you talk about legitimate gender issues facing men today, people who don't have an actual response to your argument just try to belittle you by calling you an incel. I mean, it's so ironic how the red pill and conservatives have become so similar to the blue pilled feminists they supposedly hate. Just another example of how both sides, both the left and the right, are just completely deranged and unhinged these days. And Gen Z is rightfully becoming just totally apathetic to politics in general. But that's a different story for a different video. I've personally been accused of this more times than I can count. People accusing me of just being a broke loser, coping that I'm just jealous of rich people, so on and so forth. And I'm just going to quickly address this, not because I personally care about their opinions, but because I'd rather the comment section be an actual productive dialogue than just a dumpster fire of cringe top 1% alpha males attacking me personally. I have no reason to cope or be jealous of anyone. I run an objectively successful YouTube channel, which is a dream job for most people. We just got our first sponsor and are making decent passive income. And unlike these top 1% alpha males, I didn't even need to buy a $1,000 Andrew Tate course to figure out how to do it. I live overseas where the dollar goes further, and I'm pretty content with my personal financial situation. Trust me, I know this is cringe AF, and I hate having to do this myself, but the thing is, I'm responding to something that's even more cringe and petty, which is this intellectual dishonesty of calling everyone who's rightfully unhappy with this economy and job market a job incel, essentially, is the best way I can put it. The reason I speak out about these issues is because I have a little something called empathy. Admittedly, something I don't expect these top 1% alpha males to understand. I remember what it was like being a young man with people constantly looking down on you and treating you like crap just because you're not a money printing machine for society yet. And I'm just here to call out how wrong that is on every single level. Human lives are more than just a job, more than just how much money they can print for society, more than a paycheck or a disposable statistic on a spreadsheet. Beyond being accused of being a broke and jealous coping loser, I've also been accused a lot of being an anti-work YouTube channel. And to be honest, this label is actually pretty fair. I actually do agree with and even embrace this label to a certain level. I do hate modern day work and wage slavery, in case it wasn't obvious by now. So I don't mind this label. In fact, I think it's kind of cool. But recently, as I was making a video, I kind of realized this anti-work label isn't really factually accurate. It's not so much that I or this wonderful community we've built is anti-work, so to speak. It's more just that society is so entitled and so obsessed with work, it's managed to brainwash and humiliate the masses into believing work is the default human state, and thus, if you don't like working, you are a quote-unquote anti-worker. This is a far bigger indictment on how extremist this society has gotten with work, and not something inherently wrong with young people who don't want to work. Let me give you an example to simplify and clarify exactly what I mean. I'm an American who moved to Europe in my own quest of escaping the 9-to-5 rat race. I absolutely love most aspects of Europe and will never go back to America again. There is, however, one thing I will never quite understand about Europeans: soccer. Okay, for all you Europeans watching out there, I know I'm technically supposed to say football in your country, and I apologize for being an ignorant American. It's just easier for me to say soccer, so bear with me just for this one video here. I've been a basketball fan my whole life, and as much as I tried to, I just could never get into soccer despite all my years living in Europe. The low scoring is something that I just find way too boring being a basketball fan, but that all being said, I wouldn't consider myself anti-soccer, so to speak. If you want to play, watch, or enjoy soccer in any capacity, knock yourself out. I promise you I won't stop you. I sure wouldn't shame you or call you a loser if you don't want to or are not good at playing basketball. And the way I feel about soccer is exactly the same way I feel about work. If you want to work, if a safe traditional 9-to-5 job, or even a top 1% alpha male hustle grind lifestyle appeals to you, definitely go for it. More power to you. I just don't want to work myself, and a lot of people clearly feel the same way. Going back to that guy who made that comment in the beginning of this video, young men are biased against markets because of their inability to compete in them. The biggest problem with this logic is that it's rooted in a very, very entitled mindset. The belief that we owe our lives to the market in the first place. I never asked to be, wanted to be, or consented to being a participant in the market in the first place. So trying to shame me by calling me a loser for not wanting to participate in a market that I never agreed to participate in the first place is no different than if I were to go up to every European in a soccer pub who are just minding their own business and enjoying a soccer game and calling them losers because of their inability to compete in the game of basketball, or calling them lazy because they don't want to play and get good at basketball. This would clearly be legitimately and clinically insane because they never wanted to, agree to, or consented to being a participant in the game of basketball in the first place. And it is equally insane to shame us as being lazy losers for not wanting to work or being unable to compete in the job market, as that guy would put it, when we never wanted to be, asked to be, or consented to be participants in the job market, the economy, or society in the first place.
So true. Love your channel. First off, I didn't even want to be or consent to being born. So of course I'm not interested in being a wage slave either. Birthing someone who did not want to or consent to being born and calling them lazy because they don't want to work is like if I was to break into someone's house and tranquilize them in the middle of the night and kidnap them. And the next thing you know, they wake up in a UFC ring with a jacked roid-raged UFC fighter inching their way about to beat the snot out of them. And the person looking around saying, "How did I get here? I want nothing to do with this place, this fight, or that UFC fighter." And me sitting in the stands calling them lazy because they don't want to fight. Calling someone lazy is just a shaming language to shame someone into being a good slave or doing whatever you want them to do. Pay it no mind at all. If I was so lazy, my parents should have just left my lazy ass in non-existence. Notice how these royal families and people born into wealth all these years never do any of these jobs and they don't get called lazy. But if you are born poor and you don't want to do that shit, all of a sudden you are lazy. Fuck out of here.
Alright, so this was a hilarious analogy from Scott Summers Reloaded that I think describes the situation even better than my basketball analogy. This guy's an absolute machine, by the way. All his takes are incredibly true and hilarious. If you're watching this, Scott, you should seriously consider starting your own YouTube channel talking about these issues. You'd be an absolute star. In the same way, we don't owe it to society to be a basketball player or a UFC fighter. We don't owe it to society to work. I would say the UFC analogy is better for modern times, though, for the simple fact of how brutal the job market and economy is these days. I mean, trying to get a decent paying job these days is really like being thrown in a UFC ring against your will and being asked to survive all 5 rounds against a UFC fighter. This is why, after I thought about it all, I really don't consider myself anti-work anymore. Because if you want to work, if you want to compete in this brutal economy and job market, and you think you can make it, by all means, go ahead and try. More power to you. In fact, I actually respect you for taking on such a brutal challenge. Work if you want to. Don't work if you don't want to. But you shouldn't be shamed and humiliated for not wanting to work the same way you shouldn't be shamed and humiliated for not wanting to be an NBA player or a UFC fighter. You never asked to or agreed to participating in those markets in the first place. At this point, Gen Z should seriously make their own reality TV show where the next time someone calls you lazy for not wanting to work, even though you never consented to participating in that market to begin with, we should all throw them into a UFC ring without their consent or permission and all just sit around the stands calling them lazy because they don't want to fight. Now, that would be a hell of an entertaining show to watch.